Hey guys, DoWhile here, and today we're going to be talking about looping. Now, what is looping? Looping, when you're doing code and you want to do something hundreds of times over, the only way you can do it is through looping. There's no way you're going to copy and paste all that code. What if you want to loop in a random amount of times, right? You don't, every time you run the program, you want to loop 10 times, 5 times, 20 times. You can't program for all these different cases. So we need to have loops that can loop and do code multiple times that are variable. So we're going to talk about 3 loops, and we're going to start with the very basic one first, which is called a while loop. So I'm going to have an int number. I'm going to set it equal to 0. All right. So I'm going to say while. Right. This is how we set up a while loop, right? Like an if statement, very similar. You have a while, you have your parentheses, which is going to be our test statement. And then you have your brackets for your code, okay? So, what are we going to test? So I'm going to say while number is less than 10, okay? So while our number is less than 10, right? So this is also an if statement. It's also going to only run if this is true, okay? So number has to be less than 10, right? We assigned it to 0, so it's going to execute number is less, 0 is less than 10. So what are we going to do? I'm going to say system.out print line. I'm going to type in here number. And then, I'm going to say number plus plus. Okay. I'm going to hit save. Oh, I didn't explain to you what plus plus is. Hold on. In my arithmetic video, I forgot to do this. So remember how you could do plus equals and like say 5 and like 1? Well, there's actually a shortcut to actually doing plus 1, which is just plus plus. It adds 1 to the number. There's also minus minus. A subtract 1. You could write plus equals 1, or if you wanted to, plus equals number plus 1. These all mean the exact same thing, but you see how much writing that is? Versus how much writing that is. So we're going to do number plus plus, i.e. number plus 1. I'm going to save this. Back. Let's learn Java. Compile. Compile's fine. We run it. And hey, look at that. We go from 0 to 9. 1, right? Go from 0. We start at 0. Right? We print out 0. Then we add 1. And then we do it again. As long as number is less than 10, we keep doing this. So once it gets down to here, it adds on to it. It becomes number equals 10. Number 10 is not less than 10, so the while loop stops. Right? And we can do this for as big as you want to go, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. You can do it all day long. No problems. As big loops as you want. You'll just get tons of numbers. So many numbers. Now, this is more useful than just counting numbers, but those cases will come later. But for executing multiple lines of code over and over again, that's what loops are for, right? Now let's talk about a second looping code, which is called the DoWhile. Now the DoWhile will look pretty familiar here because it's just do, and then lines, and then a while with parentheses, and then a semicolon. You actually want the semicolon here. So it's a while loop flipped on its head with a do in front. So what I'm going to say while number is less than 10. All right, and I'm going to say number is equal to 10. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say system out print line. I'm going to print out a number and number plus plus. Now, if you remember from our while loop, number had to be less than 10 for it to work, right? Number less than 10 for it to work. Now, the thing is with a do-while loop is a do-while loop will execute once regardless of whether this while loop is true. So it'll execute from top to bottom. Think of it this way, right? We do. It'll do the line of code. Then it will see if this is true. If this is true, it'll go back up to our do and execute again, right? But I set number equal to 10, so if I compile it, it still runs. It'll print out 10, but it doesn't execute again because, well, it added 1 to 10, which makes it 11, and 11 is not less than 10. so it stops. But if I go back to 0 and I run it, I'll run, we get the same result. Okay? The main thing about a while loop, a do while loop, is that it will execute at least once, regardless of if the while is true or not. So now, the last on our list is basically what we've been doing, but all simplified into one line of code. You'll notice programmers hate typing. We always try to reduce the amount of typing we have to do. So we've been having our int number, and we've been incrementing our number, and we have a test case for our number. Well, what we have is a for loop, which makes all this into one. So what we do is write for, parentheses, and then we're going to put some brackets in. Now for our for loop, what we're going to do is we're going to say int number is equal to 0, semicolon. And while number, right, we're going to put number here, is less than 10, semicolon, number plus plus. Don't need another semicolon. And then I'm going to put system.out, that print line. I'm going to put number. I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to compile. And then I'm going to run. Hey, look at that. We get the same result. So basically a for loop puts all this into one nice little package. Right? And you don't have to do plus plus here. You can do plus equals 2. Right? I'm going to add 2 to it every time. And if I compile it and run it, you get it. Incrementing by 2. Works the same way. You can have any kind of number here you want. Test. It doesn't have to be number. Most of the time it's not number. For loops, usually the letter I is used. So instead of number, you get this. This is what you'll not O. This is what you'll normally see, because number is a lot more letters to type than the letter I. So typically you'll see it just as the letter I is being used for loops. Now, what we can do here, there's some other things I want to talk about, is called nesting. Now, nesting is when you put things inside of other things. So you can nest if statements, and you can nest for loops. So I can put another for loop inside of this for loop, right? I'm going to say int j is equal to 0. J is less than 10. J plus plus. We're going to change this I to plus plus. Boom. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say system.out that print. And I'm going to print j. J times I. So we're going to start at 0. That's fine. We're going to do j times I. And I'm going to print this, which means it's going to print it. And I'm going to add a space. So what I'm doing here is a string concatenation. So it's going to take j times I. It's going to multiply them. And then it's going to convert it to a string with a space after it, just so it looks nice. Right? So what it's going to do is it's going to print these out. So our first line will be 0, then I'll add space 0. And it'll do this all the way out to 9, right? Now I want it to press enter when it's done. So with our first for loop, it's going to go across 10 spaces. And then when it's done executing, I'm going to say system.out.print line. And I'm not going to print anything there. Basically what I'll do is that'll just press enter. Now if I save this and I run it, okay, wow, we get this effect, right? So it'll go across our 10 times, and then it presses enter, and then it goes across our 10 times as well, and then it goes again and again, and we're getting all the multiples from 0 to 9, and a nice little multiplication table, right? So here, this would be I is equal to 2, and this is j is equal to 0, j is equal to 1, j is equal to 3, j is equal to 4, j is equal to 5, right? So 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times 7 is 14, right? And you get your whole multiplication table. So that's putting loops inside of other loops. And you can do that with if statements. So if I had if statement, right? If true, right? Is some kind of statement here. I can put if statements inside of if statements, right? That's perfectly fine to do. So, and this if statement will only run if this statement runs. So you can have like many layers deep of if statements as you want, where they all have to be true in order for all of the if statements to execute. Same thing here. We have this for loop loops through 10 times, right? This will loop through once. So one iteration of this is looping through this, right? So it'll iterate through all 10 of these, print line, and then it'll add one to I, and then it'll loop again, and then it'll do 10 of this, and then loops again, and does 10 of this, and eventually this does 100 operations, does 10 times 10 operations, right? So you get 100 operations in total. So that is nesting, and loops and for loops. Another thing to note is there is ways of getting out of for loops and loops in general just early. So if I said while, I'm going to say while true. Now this while loop will run on forever. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, sometimes you want that, but you need a way to get out of the loop while it's executing. So there are there's two, there's break and there's continue. Now continue is not really, it's useful for this, but it's mainly useful for loops. So what is break and what is continue? So if I said, let's make our number again. And number is equal to 0. I'm going to say number plus plus. So let's print out our number first so we get a visual idea of what's going on. Print line, and I'm going to say number. Now, let's say if number is equal to 10, right after it executes, I'm going to say out that print line, leaving loop, and then I'm going to type in break. So what does break do? So break breaks your loop. It ends the loop. It terminates our loop, right? So we're going to break out of the loop. So it'll put us down at the bottom, right? It'll stop the loop from executing. So compile, run, leaving loop, and we left the loop. And just to show us where we ended up down here now. I type in system.out, that print line. I'm just going to type in a thing program. Save, file, run, leaving loop, ending program, and we're done. Right? So we broke out of our loop. Now what about continue? What is continue used for? Well, continue will skip an iteration. What does that even mean? So let's go for if number is equal to 10, right? We're going to keep going with that route. What we're going to do, we're going to actually put this before our code. Right? So I want it to count up. Actually, we're going to need 2 of these because we're in a while loop that's going to last forever. I want to keep it that way. So we're going to use both break and continue. So if it's equal to 20, we're going to break. Right? I only want it to execute till 20. And then our number is equal to 10. I want it to continue. So what this will do is when number is equal to 10, it'll say continue. What does continue do? So continue will take basically where our program is operating, and instead of executing the following lines, it'll go back up to our while loop. It'll go back to the start, and it'll re-execute the loop. So if I run it, compile, run, we get 1 to 9. Here still execute. What happened here? Cut out number. Huh. Something wrong with my code here. Let's print out what's happening here. A little problem here. let's type skipped 10. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to skip 10. Now, it might be that it's not liking us using it during up channel. Let's learn Java. File. Problems. We run. Oh. I see the problem we're having here. So the problem is, right, we're setting numbers equal to 10. Okay? And we're going to continue. We're going to go back up here. We're going to re-execute our loop. Well, guess what? Number still equals 10. We didn't change number, so it's just constantly skipping. So what I want to do, actually I have to do this before I continue, I'm going to increment our number by 1. Because if we're constantly stuck at 10, loop will never finish. Let's compile it, run it, and there we go. So we go through our list, we skipped our number 10, then we go to 19, and then our program ends. So by continuing, we didn't execute any of this code at all down here. We skipped over it, right? Make it even more obvious if we just get rid of this, save it, file, run, and you'll see 10 is missing from our list. So continue allows you to restart the loop without executing anything below the continue. You can't execute anything below continue and continue. Okay? I think that is going to do it for our looping. And we also covered nesting, which is a very important topic. So yeah, I think that makes for a well-packed together video. Comment, rate, subscribe, and thanks for watching.